evening, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to this NDTV CEO's Dialogue, the blueprint of success, where we'll discuss on the imperatives for success for the real estate sector over the next 2 decades. And we'll also look at some of the key trends and successes that we've had over the last 2 decades. So before I start this panel discussion, I'm going to really talk just a quick snapshot. It's something that I've covered in the morning, but just a quick snapshot of the successes of the last decade or two. And I wanted to focus on the positives. So just starting off, I think the first thing worth celebrating about the sector is just the fact that, between real estate and construction, it does contribute about 16 to 17% of India's GDP. So, and the fact that it provides employment to 50 million people is something worth celebrating. And I think something we forget very often, but when we look at, contribution to GDP, I think real estate plays a critical part and really is a huge harbinger of growth for the Indian economy. And I think in terms of key trends for the future, BIM, green, prefab, precast, all these things are for the future, and I'll leave it to the experts to talk more about what they see as the future of Indian real estate. But I'm going to start with Anshuman because, he's seen real estate from, for the last 20, 25 years. He says he's been doing real estate since the age of 16. So Anshuman, what do you think have been the key things that have happened over the last decade that were worth celebrating?
Thanks. I was just telling Yash, you have listed all the things. There's nothing left for us to say. But,
no, that was the precursor.
But I will try now to, come back if there's anything left.
That's where the expertise will come.
So not repeating what all you said, there are very few things left. But I would say the biggest thing is talent. Any industry to prosper needs the top talent, and there's been a significant increase in great talent coming to real estate industry. When I started, of course, real estate was, and to small extent still is, if you couldn't do anything else, you could always do real estate, So you didn't need really qualification. You were not from the best institutions. And that has changed significantly. Today, we do recruit from the top colleges in India. People want to join real estate. It has become more professional. And I think that is what is going to take real estate to the next level. There's a time it took us especially when we started, in order to convince someone to join real estate was a major, major task. There was zero funding in real estate. Nobody would fund. It was all someone pick up the phone, private investors would put in money and do development. And today it was great when 2005 FDI opened up. For the first time, you would have CEOs of firms like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, all the big New York guys coming to India and wanting to put money. Having said all this, I can go on. I don't want to, I would rather have other people speak also. The fact is, in spite of all this, I still feel we are far behind.
Excellent. So I think, Brotin, we'll move to you. We'll kind of start off with a developer's perspective of the successes that you've seen over the last decade and, what's been worth celebrating, because we do want to talk about celebrating Indian real estate and what you've seen as a developer.
I believe that you look at it from a point of view that, there was similar kinds of projects which was going on maybe 7-10 years back. Today you have category, you look at value, you look at segmentation of the consumer market. You have different project typologies for different for different consumer groups. You have things like senior living, which is coming in to making a mark in India. It was not there about 7-10 years back. You have large number of consultants from overseas coming in and developing iconic projects in collaboration with Indian developers and Indian consultants. You have RICS coming in, which was not there some time back. You also hopefully, given the muck that has been in the real estate sector, politicians are also are coming to realization that you need to clean up the sector. That itself is a very big movement forward, because bringing in transparency and openness in an industry which has been so opaque for so long will be a very big move forward. So I think there's a lot which has been done, a lot more can be done, but it's very exciting times, and I think that most of us in this room who are in real estate are in it at the right moment in time.
Excellent. I'll move to Mr. Raheja. Again, the same question really. Do you see real estate differently from the way Brotin sees it, or have you looked at, do you see the successes over the last decade pretty much the same way?
I would rather like to take it back to more than 3 decades. Very short. I've seen in India, how cyclic the real estate actually goes. I've seen the times, in 80s in northern India, we only used to see investments coming from Calcutta, Marwadis, At that time, there was a fashion that they were investing and they used to see a huge appreciation happening in months, and they continue to multiply investments and all. And that was the time when, for the first time, people realized that real estate investment gives more, as investment it gives great returns than as actual usage itself. So we saw a lot of investments coming, and at the same time, we saw India becoming rich because of real estate. But today, where we are sitting, I look at it, it is the time probably I've seen the real bottom. The real bottom is today. And we are hopefully looking at a stable government coming. And if we all get that, be prepared. India has over 54 crore people, young people, who will be aspiring to take homes. And this India is poised to really grow, and real estate is going to drive the economy.
So, same question, Mr. Sayal. So, I mean, have you seen successes pretty much the same way that some of the other developers have looked at, and what has been worth celebrating from your perspective?
I think the best thing which has happened in the last 1 or 2 decades is that, the perception about this industry is changing. I think that's the one thing that most of the corporates say. I mean, the Tatas and, the RICS has come in, and all the big players in the corporate houses, they have joined this bandwagon, is because of the perception slowly changing. In India, middle class has arrived. Affordable income segment is now there. Now people can differentiate between the product and brand. That is very important. Earlier, I think the buyers were taken for ride by the developers. I'm sorry, but that's how the status was in this industry. But I think slowly things are changing. It's getting into the buyer's market, and competition is going to be stiff but healthy.
Excellent. Gaurav, from your perspective, and I'm just going to, just because obviously there is a repetition in the question, I'd like you to focus on a little bit of the key things as to why is there this fetish for luxury housing, and why is that a continued thing when we all see the writing on the wall and the fact that there is a larger demand on the affordable housing space. So just some insight on that.
I think if you talk about luxury, there's a lot of misconception as to what luxury is. I think like we've seen in the past 10 years, like everyone mentioned, that income levels of people have really increased. Standard of living of our society has really gone up over the past 10 years. Because of that, that people's aspirations have increased. If you go 10 years back, if you look at any society or any development, having a swimming pool, having a gymnasium, a health club, or any other amenities, you would call that as a luxury product. But today, it's the same amenities, which are there today. But unfortunately, every project is termed as a luxury project. I think there's a differentiation when it comes to ultra luxury, which is at a extremely different level, and there's a difference between a luxury project. I think this is all normal projects now. If you look at it, typically a health club, a gymnasium, a swimming pool is something which is there. So if like we primarily work in Bombay. If you look in Bombay, typically every project which you go to, this is the minimum which you require in case you need to sell your product. In case if you don't have these amenities, the standard of living of people has changed, the mindset has changed, that your product would not sell.
Yash, let's look at you now. I think it'll be important, from your perspective, if you could just throw some light on the decade that's gone by and talk about it more from a commercial real estate perspective. And
Indian real estate, when I entered, seemed like a young adolescent. A young adolescent is often remarked with very high highs and very low lows. I don't know if any of you have children which are of that age, but that's really what Indian real estate was about. One day everything was going up and everyone was clamoring for the same deal. Every buyer was trying to go for that. And suddenly in the last few years, we've seen a huge slump as well. What I see today is the next decade to come is a little bit more maturity. Think of the young adolescent becoming a young adult. There's a little bit more maturity, obviously a long way to go, but we are becoming a lot more mature. We are no more the decade of first-time buyers, first-time developers, and even first-time regulators. What's happened in the last 10 years in India has been, we've had suddenly a lot of new master plans come up. Bangalore, Delhi, well not Delhi, but Gurgaon, to some part of Calcutta, some part of Bombay. And a lot of supply came in. So regulators were just trying to kind of cash into it as they figured it out. Developers, a lot of first-time developers who'd never been in the industry before, suddenly getting into the fray, and a lot of first-time buyers thanks to the low interest rate, etc., getting into the fray.
I'll move on to Manisha now. I think I'd like you to be, we're talking about celebrating and we're talking about some of the good things that have happened, but I think from a, just play the devil's advocate. You've been looking at real estate. So what do you think has happened over the last decade? And from a consumer's perspective, what are consumers feeling about the market and what are consumers feeling about developers in general? And is the sentiment in sync?
Real estate has basically benefited not from quality, according to me. It's benefited simply because of the stupendous growth in the economy of the last 10 years and a young population which is very hungry for housing in this country. So product will sell. Yes, the buyer is getting more discerning, but the number of cases where the quality is just not up to the mark, where even the largest developer in the country go try fix an air conditioner in there. I mean, okay, one is that you get everything centrally air conditioned for which you pay 25 crores. But if you buy a house for which you paid 1.5 to 2 crores, and I'm not talking here of 40 to 50 lakhs, I'm talking here of 1.5 and 2 crores. Try fit an AC, a window or a split AC. You'll have chunks of cement falling in your hand. Okay, so if I have to pay 3 to 4 crores to get quality, that's not what I'm talking. That's not what I can or everybody can pay. So you've had 10 years of stupendous growth. You've had 10 years of tier 1 city real estate doing phenomenally well, frenzied hike and rise in prices. And what has happened in the process is housing has become unaffordable. To large number of people in this country, housing has become unaffordable. I do not hold developers solely responsible for it. We've had complicated land laws. We've had such delays in approval. The cost of capital hasn't been low, but there's a long way to go. I mean, I actually came with a wad of papers simply to even talk about cases. What are the areas of, grief? But everybody has to understand that there is still a lot of unhappiness. I'm not saying that if it doesn't take 5 years to deliver a project, it can. But then tell the buyer it's going to take 5 years. Why do you promise 3 years and then go ahead and give the product in 5 years? Everyone knows there are approval delays. Everyone knows environment clearances take some time. And all developers are aware of the pitfalls, the cash crunch. So that's what I'm saying. According to me, the future is really, yes, now. The cyclical cycle that everybody's spoken about here, I'm so glad that the euphoria of 2005 to 2012 is over. Because now comes the buyer's market, and now when the buyer can demand and hold the rein is when the industry will really change. You just don't need a Tata and a Mahindra to change industry. I mean, the real estate, how many projects will Tata, Mahindra, Godrej build? This industry is full of local developers, and they have to change. Every day when I'm reading out the names, I haven't heard of those developers. They're small individual developers, and believe me, land is with those people. Land is not, large developers aside, today joint developments are happening because everybody is running out of their land banks. So there are a lot of local developers, and each one of them has to prove themselves. And now, according to me, Sachin, the game begins when the power is shifting to the buyer.
Mr. Raheja, in your experiences with, you were doing some slum rehabilitation projects and some affordable housing projects from what I know. So what's been your experience on that? Is that something that will drive you in the future? And Brotin, if you can also talk a little bit about your experience and really your take on how you see, the Tata Group operating in the affordable housing space. So starting with you.
I would say there are many things, which more awareness has to come not only from developer perspective, it has to come from customer perspective as well. And I think media also has a role to play in educating the realities, Because if you continue talking one side story, ultimately it is, that the developers are villains,
But let me speak about the things which a developer can do to make it different. First is that our ecosystems are very inefficient. People who are dealing projects, people who have land banks, as the land keeps appreciating in value, people are not incentivized, developers and corporates or companies may not at times be incentivized to develop and finish projects on time. As a result of which, both our contractors, our developers, and I'm saying everybody, has not been incentivized to be very efficient in this industry. one of the things to make affordable housing successful and make money in it is to have best-in-class project management skills. And unfortunately, that is not something which is very prevalent in India.
Just quick 3 bullet points, really, everybody's wish list from the next government, and then we'll wrap up. Gaurav, we can start with you.
From a real estate perspective,
Absolutely.
I think simplifying the approval process, giving industry status to real estate, making finance cheap, and probably, simplifying the process for REITs, the taxation confusion which has been there. So,
Mr. Sayal?
I think whatever Gaurav has said will be common for all. But despite best of our intentions, let me tell you, we can't deliver real estate projects on time. What Yash was saying that, why we don't say if project can be completed in 3 years, 3.5 years time to the buyers. Let me tell you, we normally do this way, but can't deliver in 5 years. What we need in future is the radical change in regulations by the government. Everything starts from the government. Where do we develop the projects? We develop the projects in the master plans. Whose master plan is it? It's a government's master plan.
Sure.
When you apply for approval in the master plan, after you get the approval, they say you go to the environmental ministry.
Sure.
I am giving you the practical example. We got stuck up for more than 1 year in just getting one approval. Why? Because first state is going to deal, then center is going to deal.
Right.
So once environmental happened, then they said, you can't draw underground water for construction. You will have to be dependent on the rain god. The rainfall comes in,
Right.
and you can develop the project.
Sure.
Let me tell you, Sachin, that we, as I told you, that have got retention trust account. We put buyers' money into the account to
So
deliver
just
the
to wish
project.
this right now, because I've got 5 minutes to wrap it up, so I'm so sorry.
So that is the biggest wish list, which if can't be done, let me tell you, foreign money is not going to come in.
Right.
These REITs we are talking about, nothing is
Right.
going to happen till that happens,
Mr. Raheja?
All over 50 approvals should come and brought under one software, integrated software, and the approval should be time bound by all the government departments. You upload, it goes to every department, there is a time limit, everyone has to, instead of that we go linear from one table to other, it should be that. And they should be made accountable, those who don't reply.
first
Number
is
one.
approvals.
Number
Yeah.
two, our taxation processes and various levies, they also need to be brought under one.
Sure.
I think today we pay more than 50% our customer pays to the government through various channels,
Right.
direct or indirect.
Right.
There are so many levies, so many charges being taken by different departments in one form or the other form.
Right.
They can all be brought under one. You
Understood.
can reduce real estate if government becomes rational. The prices can get reduced substantially.
Excellent.
Number two, number three, I would say we are a generation behind in technology and skill development.
Excellent.
How we should carry on the construction.
I'm glad to hear it from a developer, and
we
it's
do
excellent.
need to, and it is not, we do need to invest into it, into technology, into processes, into systems, and only then I think we can deliver the projects in 1 year or 1.5 years or maximum 2 years.
Excellent, sir.
Very quickly, stable government, clean government, faster approval, so the cost of homes come down. The industry sells faster, and therefore we get sponsorship and cover our cost of doing a daily show on NDTV Prime. Because if the industry doesn't make money, where will our sponsorship come from? So that's really
Good, valid
important. They need to sell. Number two, industry status for affordable housing. I mean, really, the house prices have run away, and that's not just the developer who's doing it. There's just too many factors, and we need to make sure that everything which can be done for affordable housing is done. And number three, simpler names for real estate projects, so I don't mispronounce them. I mean, just look at this. Sandwood Opulence by Sandwoods Infratech. So, why Spanish Hacienda? Why can't we just do, simple red, Jaisalmer stone, just nice Italian marble, but have simpler names and help me not mispronounce them.
Excellent points. Yash?
Not to repeat everything, but three things. One is, I would say, increase supply of land. If there is any, bring more land under your development plans. You decrease the price of FSI. There's no reason the land in India should be as expensive as it is. Second is infrastructure. Make more of this land as accessible as you can so that people can actually go and get to it and buy an affordable home. And the third would be, is really sensible, practical, but regulate the, provide uniform regulatory kind of, codes, so that all of us, especially the developers who do abide by certain kind of, moral code, don't get penalized for those who don't.
Anshuman.
I would say number one is implementation of infrastructure projects with sense of urgency, and that would increase the supply of land, etc. Number two, long-term funding with low cost. I think that will make a huge difference, and this is possible to provide long-term funding for real estate. And number three is make it somehow easier to transact in the real estate market. It's still very difficult to transact for a consumer, for a developer. If this means digitization of land records, approval processes, we have to make it easier to transact in the real estate market.
I'll just say one. I think everybody's covered everything. I think build trust. Trust between the government and the developers, and between developers and consumers. And if we can work towards building trust, I think it will be a much better place for everybody to live in. Thank you.
Excellent. So very interesting, pretty much most of the views were in sync. I think pretty much it's a unanimous view from the point of view of developers. But just a quick summary snapshot of some of the things that I captured. India has become rich because of real estate. Mr. Raheja said that. I think it's a good point. That's a very valid point to celebrate. Yash made some interesting points on value for money, dependability, building dependability in our businesses, and flight to quality. So I think those are things that will be very important for real estate in the future. Transparency, more tactical, more important from a consumer's perspective. Transparency in super carpet, measurement really, I think that will go a long way in providing consumers some redress, and of course more model balanced builder-buyer agreements. Talking about, I think something delivery of projects. While we can blame approvals, but the investment in skills, talent, and making sure that we focus on delivery of projects is something that should clearly be addressed. Of course, approvals is fairly obvious and something that we all recognize. Broten made some very valid points in terms of investing in project management skills. I think it's just the investment in skills, both managerial and both for blue collar workers as professionals and workers. It's something that will go a long way in ensuring that this industry is able to deliver. And of course, ensuring industry status, lower cost capital, obviously is something that would be on the wish list of pretty much everybody. And of course, Mr. Raheja made the point on taxation and trying to make sure that some of the taxes are kind of consolidated and that is kind of addressed. So I think that really brings us to the close of the session. I think it's been a very, very interesting panel, and it's been a very interesting conference. Thank you so much for your support. One final thing I do want to mention, since there has been a focus on talent and skills, please visit the RICS School of Built Environment. I think it's a fairly landmark initiative amongst the successes for the real estate industry. It's something that I think a lot of these people who are here have all contributed to building. We kind of aspired to build it, but I think now we've got it up and running. I think I'd encourage all of you to visit the school and support it wholeheartedly and address some of your delivery and project management challenges, hopefully, for the future. Thank you so much.